Chapter 4, The First Worm. The huge night crawler sprawled limply in the center of the platter, brown and steaming. Boiled, said Tom. We boiled it. Billy stormed about the barn, kicking barrels and posts, arguing, a night crawler is not a worm. If it was a worm, it'd be called a worm. A night crawler is a night crawler. Finally, Joe ran off to get his father's dictionary. Night crawler, noun, earthworm. A large earthworm found on the soil surface at night. Billy kicked a barrel. It still wasn't fair. He didn't care what any dictionary said. Everybody knew the difference between a night crawler and a worm. Look at the thing. Ugh! It was as big as a souvenir pencil from the Empire State Building. Ugh! He poked it with his finger. Alan said they had agreed right at the start that he and Joe would choose the worms. If Billy was going to cheat, the bet was off. He got up and started for the door. He guessed he had other things to do besides argue all day with a Fink. So Tom took Billy aside into a horse stall and put his arm around Billy's shoulders and talked to him about George Cunningham's brother's mini bike and how they could ride it on the trail under the power lines behind Odell's farm, up and down the hills, bounding over rocks, rum. Sure, it was a big worm, but it'd only be a couple more bites. Did he want to lose a mini bike over 2 bites? Slop enough mustard and ketchup and horseradish on it, and he wouldn't even taste it. Yeah, said Billy. I could probably eat this one, but I gotta eat 15. You can't quit now, said Tom. Look at him. He nodded at Alan and Joe waiting beside the orange crates. They'll tell everybody you were chicken. It'll be all over school. Come on. He led Billy back to the orange crate, sat him down, tied the napkin around his neck. Alan flourished the knife and fork. Would Monsieur like it carved lengthwise or crosswise? Ketchup? Asked Joe, showing his teeth. Cut it out, said Tom. Here. He glopped ketchup and mustard and horseradish on the night crawler. Squeezed on a few drops of lemon juice and salted and peppered it. Billy closed his eyes and opened his mouth. Ooh, what's in? Tom sliced off the end of the night crawler and forked it up. But just as he was about to poke it into Billy's open mouth, Billy closed his mouth and opened his eyes. No, let me do it. Tom handed him the fork. Billy gazed at the dripping ketchup and mustard, thinking, oh, it's all right talking about eating worms, but doing it? Tom whispered in his ear, mini bike. Billy poked the fork into his mouth, chewed furiously, gulped. His eyes crossed, swam, squinched shut. He flapped his arms wildly, and then opening his eyes, he grinned beatifically up at Tom. Superb, Gaston! Tom cut another piece, ketchuped, mustarded, salted, peppered, horseradished, and lemoned it, and handed the fork to Billy. Billy slugged it down, smacking his lips. And so they proceeded, now sprinkling on cinnamon and sugar or a bit of cheese, some cracker crumbs or Worcester sauce, until there was nothing on the plate but a few stray dabs of ketchup and mustard. Well, said Billy, standing up and wiping his mouth with his napkin, so we are done mit it first, Dick. Now, seconds. Let me look in your mouth, said Alan. Yeah, said Joe, see if he swallowed it all. Certainly, said Billy. Look as long as you want. Alan and Joe scrutinized the inside of his mouth. Okay, said Tom. Leave him alone now. Come on, 1 down, 14 to go. How'd it taste? Asked Alan. Good, said Billy. Very fine, hoo-hoo. He flapped his arms like a big bird and began to hop around the barn, crying, Good, very fine, good. Alan and Joe and Tom looked worried. Oh, yeah, good. How you feeling, Billy? Tom asked. Yeah, stop flapping around and come tell us how you're feeling, said Joe. They huddled together by the orange crates as Billy hopped around and around them, flapping his arms. Goot, goot, very fine, very fine, whoop, whoop. Alan whispered, he is crackers. Joe edged toward the door. Don't let him see that we're afraid. Crazy people are like dogs. If they see you're afraid, they'll attack. It couldn't be, whispered Tom, standing his ground. One worm? Goot, goot, screeched Billy, hopping higher and higher and drooling from the mouth. Come on, whispered Joe to Tom. Hey, Billy, burst out Tom suddenly in a hearty, quavering voice. Cut it out, will you? I want to ask you something. Billy's arms flapped slower. He tiptoed menacingly around Tom, his head cocked on one side, his cheeks puffed out. Tom hugged himself, chuckling nervously. Hey, cut it out, will you, Billy? Hey. Billy pounced. Joe and Alan fled, the barn door banging behind them. Billy rolled on the floor, helpless with laughter. Tom clambered up, brushing himself off. Did you see their faces? Billy said, laughing. Climbing over each other out the door. Oh, geez, Joe. Joe was as pale as an onion. Yeah, said Tom. Ha ha, you fooled them. Oh, geez. Billy sat up, then he crawled over to the door and peeled out through a knothole. Look at them, peeking up over the stone wall. Watch this. The door swung slowly open. Screeching, Billy hopped onto the door sill into the yard, up onto a stump, splash into a puddle, flapping his arms and rolling his head. Alan and Joe galloped up the hill through the high grass, yelling, Here he comes, get out of the way. And then Billy stopped hopping and climbing up on a stump, called in a shrill, girlish voice, Oh, boys, where are you going? I'd something tell you, ittle boys. Alan and Joe stopped and looked back. Is you going home, ittle boys? Yelled Billy. Is you scared? Who's scared, you lunk? Called Alan. Yeah, yelled Joe. I guess I can go home without being called scared if I want to. But ain't you a awfully hooey? Shouted Billy. I just remembered I was supposed to help my mother wash windows this afternoon, said Alan. That's all. He turned and started up through the meadow, his hands in his pockets. Yeah, said Joe. Me too. He trudged after Alan. Alan and Joe stopped in the orchard by the pile of fresh dirt. You think he'll be able to do it? Asked Alan, biting his thumbnail. I don't know, said Joe. He can't do it, said Alan. How could anybody eat 15 worms? My father'll kill me. $50? He ate that one awful easy. Forget it, said Joe. If he doesn't give up himself, I'll figure something out. We could spike the next worm with pepper. He'd eat one piece and then another, talking to Tom. Then all of a sudden he'd sneeze. Catch him. Then he'd sneeze again. Catch him. Then again. Catch him. Catch him. A faint look of panic would creep over his face. He's beginning to wonder if he'll ever stop. He clutches his stomach. His eyes begin to watch her. Catch him. Catch him. Billy's awful stubborn, said Alan. Even if it was killing him, he might not give up. Catch him. Catch him, cried Bill. He falls to the floor. I bend over him. What, I say? Call his mother. It's the troglodyte crowus. His eyes bleed up at me. Catch him. Remember that business last summer, said Alan, gnawing on his thumbnail, when it was 95 degrees in the shade, and I dared him to put on all his winter clothes and his father's raccoon coat and his ski boots and walk up and down Main Street all afternoon. Catch you! Catch you! They went off through the orchard, Joe sneezing, sighing, rolling his eyes, pretending to be Billy suffering from a dose of peppered worm. Alan moaning to himself about how stubborn Billy could be. $50. Billy sighed. On the plate before him lay the last bite of worm under a daub of ketchup and mustard. What's the matter? Asked Tom. I don't know, sighed Billy. He picked up the fork again. Does it taste bad? No, said Billy wearily. I just taste ketchup and mustard mostly, but it makes me feel sort of sick, even before I eat it. Just thinking about it. He sighed again and then glanced at Joe and Alan talking to each other in whispers over by the window. What are they whispering about? Nothing. Then what are you whispering for? Nothing. It's not important. Just something Joe's father told him last night. What? Come on, finish up. It was nothing. We'll miss the cartoons. Billy shut his eyes and popped the last piece of the worm into his mouth. Chewed, gagged, clapped his hands over his mouth, gulped, toppled backwards off the orange crate, sprawling on his back in the chaff. He gazed peacefully up at the ceiling. Joe and Alan stood over him. Open up. Billy opened his mouth. Wider. Do you see any, Joe? Nope. He swallowed it. Okay, let's go.